Satoru Gojo is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in the world and the man who could single-handedly destroy humanity. Season 2 of the Jujutsu Kaisen anime is finally giving us some insight into Gojo's insane backstory. But even with that information from the anime, you won't get the full truth. However, by the end of this video, you will know everything about Gojo's secret past and hidden power, his true intentions and motivations, and why he is actually the biggest monster in the entire series. Now drop a like for Gojo, subscribe for more Jujutsu Kaisen content, and let's get into it. Satoru Gojo was born on December 7th, 1989, and he is such a menace that after his birth, the balance of power in the entire Jujutsu world shifted. Gojo was the first person in 400 years to be born with both the power of Limitless and the power of the Six Eyes. And this was such a big deal that it resulted in curses becoming stronger after his birth. Basically, the good guys became so overpowered thanks to the appearance of Gojo that curses started getting stronger in order to compensate. I repeat, Gojo's birth literally threw the balance of the universe out of whack. And so the universe had to start making curses stronger in order to make up for it. If that doesn't tell you just how overpowered Gojo truly is, then I don't know what will. Satoru was so powerful that the other important sorcerer families felt intimidated by him, and they were afraid that they would lose their own status because this one member of the Gojo family was so freaking strong. These other families went so far as to put out a hit on him while he was still a kid, but all the bounty hunters who tried to kill him failed, and Gojo was able to develop into the charismatic powerhouse that he is today. In fact, Gojo is widely considered to be the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer of the modern era. And if you ask Gojo, he believes himself to be the strongest sorcerer of any era. On several occasions, he has stated that he, at full power, could defeat even the legendary Sukuna in his prime. According to Gojo's character profile in the first volume of the manga, he can do anything that he sets out to do, essentially making the impossible possible. Gojo is so strong that if technology ran on cursed energy rather than gas or electricity, Gojo would apparently have the ability to power an entire large nation like the United States on his own. His powers are so great that they could pose a threat to the whole world if they ever ended up in the wrong hands. Geto has stated in the past that Gojo could potentially destroy all of humanity, so let's just be glad that he's one of the good guys. Now, even though the Gojo family is one of the big three sorcerer families along with the Zenin and Kamo families, Satoru is literally the only known member of the Gojo family in modern times. Satoru is the head of the Gojo clan, and he also seems to be the only noteworthy sorcerer in the current generation of the family. And yet, because he is so powerful, he just kind of solo carries the entire family and keeps them at the top of the food chain. The Gojo clan originally descended from Michizane Sugawara, one of the big three vengeful spirits from the Heian period of Japanese history. He was a true legend in the Jujutsu world, but between him and Satoru, there were many other Gojo clan sorcerers in the past. So, what makes Satoru Gojo in particular so powerful, and why is he so special? As a member of the Gojo bloodline, Satoru inherited the prestigious Gojo clan technique known as Limitless. This cursed technique brings the concept of infinity into the physical world, allowing its user to distort and manipulate space. In its base state or neutral state, which is known as infinity, Limitless has the ability to stop anything and everything, including enemy attacks. Although technically the technique doesn't stop things, it just slows them down so much that they may as well have been effectively stopped. Let me try to explain this more clearly by using the very paradox that Gojo himself references when talking about his power, the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. The famed Greek hero Achilles is challenged to a race by a common tortoise. The slow-moving tortoise says that it can outrun the great Achilles as long as it has been given a bit of a head start. Achilles believes himself to be the fastest man in the world, and there is no way that he could lose to something as slow as a tortoise, so he accepts the challenge and the race begins with the tortoise having a 100-meter head start. Achilles immediately rushes forward, determined to overtake the tortoise. He quickly covers the distance of 100 meters and reaches the point where the tortoise had begun the race, but by that time the tortoise managed to move 10 meters forward. Achilles then runs another 10 meters to reach the position where the tortoise was, but by the time he arrives there, the tortoise has moved another meter. By the time that Achilles moves to that location, the tortoise has moved slightly forward again, and so on and so on. In the end, Achilles never catches up because there is always an increasingly small gap between him and the tortoise, but a gap nonetheless. Here's another way to think about it. Let's say you want to walk from one tree to another. In order to reach the second tree, you will need to reach the halfway point between the two trees, and then the halfway point between that point and the second tree, and then the halfway point between the new halfway point and the tree, and so on infinitely. If you keep dividing the remaining distance in half, you will never arrive at your destination, and at some point you will be moving so slowly that it will look like you're not moving at all. This is a mathematical paradox, also known as Zeno's paradox. In mathematics, no matter how many times you divide a number, it will never go down to zero. It will keep going down to smaller and smaller fractions infinitely, but never to actual zero. In the real world, Achilles will easily overtake the tortoise. In the real world, if you want to walk from one tree to another, you will easily arrive at your destination. Of course, you won't start infinitely dividing the distance you cover in half, you're just going to cover the distance. So this is a theoretical mathematical paradox, not something that occurs in everyday life. However, Limitless actually brings this mathematical paradox into reality. So, if something like an enemy attack tries to approach the user of Limitless, in this case Gojo, it will never reach him. Limitless transforms the finite amount of space between the attacker and Gojo into infinite space. The enemy attack will never make contact with Gojo because its distance from Gojo will just keep dividing itself infinitely. The attacker essentially becomes Achilles and Gojo becomes the tortoise. Limitless is so powerful, not only because it prevents enemy attacks from making contact with Gojo, but also because Gojo can expand the invisible infinite barrier that Limitless generates in order to completely neutralize enemy techniques and overpower them outright. And if that wasn't enough, there are multiple other techniques that Limitless allows Gojo to perform beyond just infinity. Before we get into the epic details of these other overpowered techniques, let's quickly talk about Gojo's other incredible inherited technique, the Six Eyes. The Six Eyes is an ocular jujutsu. That's jujutsu, not jutsu, okay? And this ocular jujutsu allows its user to detect cursed energy and see the flow of it, as well as to instantly analyze his opponent's cursed technique. On top of that, Six Eyes allows its user to have unbelievably precise control of their cursed energy right down to an atomic level, ensuring that the user of Six Eyes will virtually never run out of cursed energy because they are able to use it so incredibly efficiently. Basically, Six Eyes allows Gojo to use so little cursed energy that he never runs out, because he recovers it faster than he can spend it. His supply of cursed energy is not actually infinite. Both Yuta and Sukuna have more cursed energy than Gojo overall, but Gojo's efficiency in how he uses it makes it practically infinite. The Six Eyes are essentially the perfect technique for mastering and unlocking the full potential of Limitless. And it is this unique combination of Limitless and the Six Eyes that makes Gojo the strongest sorcerer of the modern era. The Six Eyes is such a rare technique that no two people can ever possess it at the same time. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been 400 years since a single person possessed both the Six Eyes and Limitless. A user of Six Eyes has visual powers beyond those of any other sorcerer, allowing them to essentially see in high resolution infrared vision. Gojo can literally see through a blindfold without a problem, and he can easily see what's happening several kilometers away. In fact, the reason why Gojo uses a blindfold in the first place is to avoid overly straining his eyes, because the Six Eyes is a power that is always on and it cannot be deactivated. In chapter 71, the sorcerer killer Toji Fushiguro mentions that he once went to see the legendary Satoru Gojo back when Gojo was still a kid. And Gojo was the only person who was ever able to detect Toji's presence even while Toji was standing behind him. Okay, now that we've established what the Six Eyes power is, let's talk about all the ways that Gojo combines the Six Eyes and Limitless in order to bring out the full potential of both techniques in absolutely spectacular ways. First, let's talk about Blue, also known as Cursed Technique Lapse, Blue. If Infinity is the base form of Limitless, then Blue is its strengthened form, and it is activated when Gojo amplifies the amount of cursed energy that he is pouring into the technique. Blue allows the user to bring more theoretical mathematical concepts into reality, this time the concept of negative numbers and negative distance. Basically, Gojo uses Limitless to create negative space, and then normal space immediately begins to compensate by drawing everything towards that negative space in order to fill it. This allows Gojo to pull people and objects towards that space at great speed, similarly to the way a huge magnet works. This technique can be used with less intensity in order to pull in targets towards each other, and this same effect can be used to make the user himself move at high speeds by pulling himself so quickly towards a specific destination that it appears as if he is teleporting. Gojo's ability to use Blue as a means of transport enables him to become one of the fastest sorcerers in history. However, the technique can also be used with more intensity to pull apart entire buildings in an instant, or to completely destroy the bodies of enemies. Blue is a technique that is very difficult to use, because it requires a lot of cursed energy, and it requires that energy to be used in an extremely precise way. Luckily for Gojo, the 6 Eyes allows him to do exactly that. Next, let's talk about Red, also known as Reversed Limitless Red. Gojo uses the positive energy that comes from his reverse curse technique to reverse the effects of Blue. Rather than attracting objects and people like Blue does, Red repels them. If Blue is like two oppositely charged magnets that are attracted to each other, then Red is like two similarly charged magnets that repel each other. Gojo produces a small red orb on the tip of his finger, and when the power of the orb is released, it generates a massive shockwave that blows everything within the surrounding area away from Gojo. Red's cursed energy output is said to be at least twice the cursed energy output of Blue, which also increases the potential for collateral damage. Since Red requires the use of reverse curse technique, and since only a small number of sorcerers in history have been able to use this technique, Satoru Gojo is one of the only people to be able to use Red in the history of the world. And even he had to work hard in order to learn how to use it. It actually took a near-death experience for him to finally figure it out. And if you thought that Red and Blue were badass, then wait until I tell you about the super secret fusion technique called Hollow Technique Purple. Purple is created through the merging of Blue and Red. When the two opposite powers collide, an imaginary mass is produced, and this mass has the ability to essentially erase everything in its path out of existence. Purple neither attracts nor repels. It produces a purple energy ball that simply annihilates everything it touches. The existence of this technique is such a closely guarded secret that members of the other prominent families, such as the Zenin clan, don't even know that it exists, and thus they have no effective way to counter it. As it should be clear by now, all of Gojo's powers are insanely rare and impressive, including the 6 Eyes, Limitless itself, and the various techniques derived from Limitless, such as Infinity, Red, Blue, and Purple. But we can't end a discussion on Gojo's power without talking about his greatest power of all, Gojo's domain expansion called Unlimited Void. Unlimited Void allows Gojo to bring himself and his target or targets inside the Limitless itself. As the name suggests, the area within Limitless is an unlimited void that contains an infinite amount of knowledge and information. In fact, when a target is forced to enter Unlimited Void, their mind is immediately bombarded with endless information to the point of overwhelming them and rendering them completely immobile. The user and anyone he touches directly is immune from this effect, but the user's intended target will eventually lose their mind and even die if Gojo doesn't deactivate the power. The effect of Unlimited Void is so powerful that if a non-sorcerer is exposed to it for more than 0.2 seconds, they will suffer lasting consequences and death. In those 0.2 seconds, an entire 6 months worth of information floods into the target's mind. This renders them unconscious, and after they regain consciousness, they will require like 2 months of therapy just to get back to normal. Although Gojo's Limitless and its techniques are amongst the most powerful abilities in Jujutsu Kaisen, and they are quite possibly the single strongest power when taken as a whole, there are some ways that exceptionally strong opponents of Gojo can attempt to counter his techniques. Limitless can be countered by other exceptionally powerful domain expansions or domain amplifications. And there are some cursed tools infused with specialized curse techniques that can interfere with the power of Limitless. But believe it or not, Limitless and the Six Eyes are not even the only powers that Gojo possesses. Gojo is extremely strong and fast physically. He has incredible endurance, and he is an expert in hand-to-hand combat. Gojo is also very tactical and a master strategist, and these important abilities are of course boosted by the Six Eyes, allowing Gojo to develop superhuman observational and analytical skills. Gojo is also capable of producing many other techniques, including Black Flash, Curtain, Simple Domain, and Falling Blossom Emotion. Falling Blossom Emotion is actually a secret technique passed down within the big three sorcerer families that serves as a countermeasure against the domain expansions of your opponents. This technique can either nullify a domain's attacks entirely, or it can reduce the damage suffered by the user in case their opponent's domain is incredibly strong. New Shadow style Simple Domain also allows Gojo to counter enemy domains by neutralizing the can't miss attacks of the domain in question. Gojo doesn't normally need to use this technique, and he only uses it against the most powerful opponents. Finally, it is important to note that Gojo's mastery of reverse curse technique also sets him apart from other sorcerers. Not only can he use this technique continuously in order to heal his body in perpetuity, but Gojo can also use reverse curse technique to recover his burnt out curse technique after using domain expansion, allowing him to create 5 or more domain expansions within the span of only a few minutes. We can't forget that the vast majority of sorcerers who are even able to use domain expansion can only use it like once a day tops, so this is a huge deal. And after learning all of that about Gojo's spectacular powers and abilities, I don't think I need to tell you how dangerous these powers could be if they ever got into the wrong hands. If, for whatever reason, Gojo turned bad like his best bud Geto, or if he lost control of his body in some way, the entire world would be absolutely screwed. Thankfully, despite his eccentricities, we know that Gojo is a good guy who wants to reform the world of Jujutsu sorcerers and end the corruption and discrimination perpetuated by the old ruling elite. He is determined to mentor a new generation of sorcerers who will go on to change the world for the better, together with Gojo himself. That said, the possibility of Gojo one day going berserk or losing control of his body in some way is not out of the question. And if this were to ever happen, all of humanity could be wiped out. In order to fully explore the dark truth about Gojo's powers and how they could one day end the world as we know it, I will have to get into some spoilers from the latest arcs of the manga. So with that said, please proceed with caution. So far we've only talked about Gojo's backstory and powers and not about the current plot itself. But from this point onward, some important plot points will be spoiled. If you are anime only, you have been warned. During the infamous Shibuya incident, Kenjaku and the other villains managed to seal Gojo inside Prison Realm, a special grade cursed object that contains a living barrier constructed with the final remains of the Buddhist monk Genshin. This barrier has the ability to seal anything or anyone, including Gojo. Gojo spends 19 days sealed inside this object, and then he is successfully unsealed by his allies. The unsealing takes place in chapter 221 of the manga, and this scene in which Gojo is unsealed tells us a lot about just how dangerous Gojo could potentially become. While preparing to unseal Gojo, Yuji, Shoko, Hikari, Angel, and the others realize that because physical time doesn't flow in the prison realm, there is no way to tell how Gojo actually experienced the time he spent sealed away. It might have just felt like a moment to him, or it might have felt like he was alone for hundreds of years. Everyone is worried about what Gojo's state of mind might look like upon his release, and as Shoko points out, depending on his mental state, it could actually be dangerous to unseal him in a confined space. So they decide to unseal Gojo inside an abandoned mine in the middle of nowhere in order to avoid any potential destruction to the surrounding area. And even though Gojo is ultimately fine upon his release and he just rushes to confront Geto right away, the preparations that his allies take before his release confirms the fact that Gojo has the potential to be extremely dangerous. If Gojo were to ever become psychologically imbalanced in any way, or if he was to somehow be possessed by Kenjaku or manipulated in some other way, he would become a massive threat not just to the small community of Jujutsu sorcerers, but to all of Japan and to the entire world. Now, Gojo being Gojo, not only did his confinement inside the prison realm not unnerve him, but it actually made him stronger by teaching him how to create an extremely small domain. A domain that is so dense and refined that it's actually smaller than the size of a basketball. This absolutely insane durability and adaptability is what we love about Gojo. But it is crazy to think about just how screwed the entire world would be if Gojo ever turned to the dark side. Actually, I wonder if someone who has been as powerful as Gojo from such a young age could one day evolve to the point of surpassing his own humanity, kind of like Master Tengen. As powerful and important as Tengen is to the entire Jujutsu world, Tengen is also potentially dangerous. If Tengen evolves too far beyond humanity itself, there is no telling what this godlike creature might do and how much chaos and destruction the creature's ultimate power might cause. In some ways, the story of Tengen could be foreshadowing the ultimate fate of Gojo. And if that were the case, it would be a terrifying twist. What do you guys think? Could Gojo ever become a threat to humanity if he loses control of his power, or if he is somehow manipulated into doing evil things by Kenjaku and the villains? How strong will Gojo become by the end of the series? And is he the next Tengen? Could Gojo become a god or a monster? Don't forget to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. If you're looking for more epic Jujutsu Kaisen videos to watch, check out our Jujutsu Kaisen playlist, link in the description and on screen right now. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like. And if you're new to the channel, or maybe you watch my videos but you haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a huge favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Subscribing on YouTube is completely free, but it helps me out a lot.